Hello, welcome back to Bonaventure Time. Happy Easter. He is risen. Alleluia. So today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm making a response to a video I had watched rather recently. And it was on non-monogamous love and marriage, a defense for that. And then phenomenology as a defense or as a given philosophy that can support that. So, one, I disagree with non-monogamous love and marriage. I believe marriage ought to be monogamous. Um, Two, I want to respond to the idea of phenomenology as being like a basis for that. The claim was made by a professor that phenomenologists are all in agreement, essentially, that there's no feeling of oneness, or there's no such thing really as oneness in a philosophy of love between the two. And from that, there's coming from this background for them, a Beauvoirian, Sartrean background of developing a need, this theory of the look in the other, and developing this need for a third person to come in based off of one of Beauvoir's novels, a written work where it shows how the two kind of come to refine their love or seem to foster something that's, as always for Beauvoir, it's left in a very depressing way. But in some way, there's a certain spark of ideas of love after a third enters into the relationship. And so the analysis is made based off of that kind of background and this idea of not feeling a oneness in really the experience of love. And the claim was made that phenomenologists are kind of in agreement with that idea of not having a oneness, so to speak. So I want to respond to that because I disagree with both of those, and hopefully I can do the best of my ability to kind of explain why I disagree with both of those, not just off of fundamental beliefs in my faith, but actually as philosophically reasoning through this and showing that what I find to be philosophically unsound and contrary to human nature. Which might seem like a big claim, but again, hopefully I can explain why. That is, so treating non-monogamous love, I want to treat that first, and then we'll go into phenomenology. I would hope that this is actually rather obvious why you can't have non-monogamous love, but apparently it's not. So, here we go. I'm going to be drawing, by the way, just from different philosophers. Some of them will be Catholic, and I realize that some people might claim that makes me biased. I don't believe so, but even then, I will even be drawing from some non-Catholic philosophers, or even the ancients as well. So, that's a preface, just so it's not like I'm biased in my philosophical analysis. The idea of non-monogamous love. Well, marriage is a reality. It's not a state. That's something that needs to be understood. Marriage is not this contract, right? It has nothing to do with Locke's philosophy of contract, right? You consent to something given, right? It has nothing to do with that, or Hobbes, or anything of that. It's not analogous in any way. It's not this state. It's not this title you get. It's a reality. That's what marriage is, right? It's two entering into the reality of wedded love, right? Conjugal love, whatever synonyms you want to use for that, right? It is a reality, and it's a different quality of expression, right? And this is, right, we can find expressions of this in Dietrich von Hildebrand in Defense of Purity, where he talks about the difference between this kind of love, right? What makes this unique is it's a different quality of love, right? Because you have friendships, you have your family, right? There's this sort of, if you want to use the different Greek words like spurge or philos love, the eros love, right? Agape love, right? You can understand different forms of love that you have. And marriage is a different quality of love. Why? Because it's this expression of self-gift to one another. And the idea of self-gift, right, is totally, I can see why someone would make a claim for non-monogamous love, because the idea of self-gift is not found in Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre. And that's why I do not turn to them. Not because I find their philosophy bad, although at times I will question their philosophy, but because when I go to a philosophy of love, especially a phenomenology of love, right, I am looking for truth. And I find truth in the fact that humans, right, humans have this capacity for self-gift, right? We long for community. We long for unity, right? I think I'm speaking to everyone's experience in that there's this longing for something outside of oneself. There's a longing for love, right? We have this capacity in ourselves to give of ourselves. That's why we can we have married people in the first place, because they have this capacity for self-gift. That is a theme that is found, you could say, in St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, but I would say most richly and most profoundly emphasized in Dietrich von Hildebrand and Karol Wojtyła. They're in complete harmony in that. If you look at Love and Responsibility and In Defense of Purity, even The Nature of Love by Hildebrand, right, you're going to see actually a parallel structure in the way they write and the way they talk about marriage, not only marriage, but holy orders, religious life, priesthood, right? The theme is self-gift. That is the state of love. That is really one of the essential, intrinsically essential parts of marriage, so to speak, is the need for self-gift. That is something lacking in Sartrean and Beauvoirian philosophy. But it's found in Dietrich von Hildebrand, and the reason I'm elaborating on this, if we go to this idea of self-gift, the two must totally give themselves to one another, right? A total self-gift. Otherwise, it's really not a gift, right? And you have to make a gift of yourself, right? Because you can't say, you're a gift to the other, and right, you see a beautiful woman, and you think they're beautiful, you want to make a gift of them, but if you don't view yourself as a gift, right, what are you giving them, right? You have to make a self-gift, and it has to be mutual, reciprocal. That's something richly developed in Wojtyła's Love and Responsibility, chapter 2 in his metaphysical analysis, right? But here's the thing, and this is what I appreciate from Hildebrand and Wojtyła, is the two have this capacity for self-gift, or the spousal meaning, which John Paul, as Pope John Paul II, would richly develop in his theology of the body. But it's not just subjective, right? The two don't endure because they have these feelings, right? Rather, it's a reciprocal, effective response. That would be Hildebrandian language. But the point is, Hildebrand and Wojtyła would both agree on this, is it's the object, there's the object of truth that grounds the relationship, not just the feelings, because those are subjective and subject to change. Now, Wojtyła and Hildebrand, you would find some differences in how they express feelings and passions, and right, there's differences there, but both know that the good and truth determine, right, the marriage, right? It's founded upon something permanent, truth, good, right? There's a common good, so to speak, right? And you can find this in Aristotle's Ethics, his Politics, Plato's Republic, Book 1, 2, 3, right? That's actually really the whole theme of the Republic, right? So this is something not new to philosophy, right? You could call it St. Augustine's order of love, right? Essentially, and this is essentially what philosophers have been saying all along, because they've understood the reality of marriage as a monogamous reality between two people, right? Making a total self-gift, and if you add a third in there, that shatters, right, that unitive aspect, right? And so I hope that kind of gives you an idea of why marriage has to be monogamous, because it's this capacity for one another to give of each other in a unique expression of love, right? It's a different quality, it's a different friendship, and it's entering into a reality, not a title, right? Marriage is a reality, and that reality demands total self-gift. That's the permanence, right? Because when you're married, right, that is an indissoluble bond, as some would say, which is true, right? And it's only indissoluble if you make a total self-gift of yourself. And if that's lacking, right, then the relationship's lacking. In order to make a total self-gift, you have to fully express yourself, and it has to be a total self-abandonment, self-surrender would maybe be a better way to put it, to the other, and that can only be found in a monogamous love. Okay. More could be said, but I hope that that's an adequate enough response to kind of say why there needs to be monogamous love in marriage. Going into phenomenology, I've actually already mentioned a few of them, John Paul II, or Karol Wojtyła, and Dietrich von Hildebrand, but because those are Catholics, and I'm a Catholic myself, right, I can understand people saying, well, you only have a Catholic perspective, and you're biased. So I'm going to go to the heart of phenomenology, to Edmund Husserl and Edith Stein, who, yes, is a saint, but a lot of phenomenological works were written before she was Catholic, so I can't be biased there. Nor should you. Because, right, we're pursuing truth. This is what we're doing here. This is why I'm making this response, not out of, I just want to right, help people towards the truth, right? Philosophize together so we can come to the truth. And if you disagree with me, let me know, and we can talk about this, because this is meant to lead, right? We're meant to find the truth, and this is what this is the purpose for, is just pursuing truth here. All right, the idea of phenomenology and phenomenologists in agreement on the feeling of oneness being absent in relationships. No, so I don't agree with that, and I don't. I want to go to Maurice Merleau-Ponty, but I'm going to focus on Husserl and Stein. I'm going to start with personalism. Personalism is this movement of looking at the subject and stressing a greater priority of the subject in philosophical analysis. And one of the themes of personalism, it starts with an I structure, so there's this self-presence to oneself the self-presence that we have to ourselves, right? So St. Augustine uses an example in the Trinity, book 10, that I have to, right, go through these logical demonstrations and propositions to understand the angels, or something like that. Not that I can fully comprehend that, but right, to have an understanding of something else. But I have to think of myself to be present to myself. It's a sort of memoria, as St. Bonaventure would call it, a self-presence. So personalism actually kind of adopts something similar without actually really realizing it, although some did. And that's the idea. And from this self-presence, I understand the I structure. Elizabeth Anscombe, an analytic, was actually really good at this, and understanding this, right? Because if I understand the name, John, my name, so if I understand John, right, I am the object. That's like a third-person reference. But, so if someone says John walked, meaning me, they're referring to me. But if I said I walked, that's the same thing as saying John walked for them, right? But the difference is I'm understanding the subjective dimension of that. I am both the object and the subject of my response of saying. If I said John walked, I'd be the object of this logical assertion, right? They call it the language game for the analytics. But if I say I walked, I am both the object and the subject, right? It is a first person, sort of third person sort of pronouncement, right? And it's this sort of self-presence that I have in developing this I structure. There's something unique to that, to being present to oneself. That's where personalism kicks off. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think it's important to understand that, to understand how you get to this idea of oneness. And I think it needs to be clarified. So you start with this I structure, and once you understand the self-presence, right, you understand that I am a personal subject with a subjectivity. Now, if we go back to Edith Stein's empathy, which I've talked about numerous times in my different videos, right, I understand others as personal subjects with subjectivity, right? I understand that though I can take my phone and I can throw it, and there's no moral guilt to be found in that such an action, I can't do that with a person. Right? Because they are a personal subject acting on the world. This is why you'd see Cara Wojtyła say the acting person. It's never just the person for him. The acting person. Intentional, right? Acting on the world. Right? So I see other acting people in their personal subjectivity. And from that, it's not just this I sort of object relationship with them. I have an I-thou relationship, is what we call it in personalism. And through this I-thou structure, right, and through Einfühlung, this empathy, right, this reciprocity, borrowing from Wojtyła, with Stein together, both phenomenologists, and I should mention Husserl touches upon this in his ideas later in his life, in the Cartesian Meditations as well, adopting a lot of Stein's work on empathy. Through this reciprocity of empathy, right, there's this intercommunication, interpersonal, right, act is what Husserl would call it. And from that, the I-thou becomes a we structure. Now, this we structure, I think, is really important, because I think sometimes people might understand it as a sort of, we make a communal decision together. But actually, I would argue it goes deeper than that. And I think Husserl himself would argue that. Because in this we structure, it is this feeling of oneness. It's why Stein and Husserl in their politics and their political philosophy would emphasize society as a super individual. Because what it is this oneness of a community, right? It's the seeing the others as subject, as Stein says in her philosophy of psychology and her treatise on community. It's the super individual because others are seeing each other as subjects, and it's the we structure. And Wojtyła would say something similar. Husserl would say something similar. Dietrich von Hildebrand says something similar. Max Scheler says something similar. Adolf Reinach says something similar. Right? These are all phenomenologists. And it's not just this sort of we in the sense that we are a community and we make this decision together. It's this feeling of oneness. It's this unity to be found, right? This unity found because we're all pursuing truth. This is just on like a communal level, community level, right? It's not an association, as Stein would say. It's a community, right? But you can go further, right? You can go further. And what's dictating this community is the common good that they're pursuing, right? They all pursue truth together. That's their unity. And they form this wheat structure based off of the common good they're pursuing, right? And there's this unity and this feeling of oneness, right? And you take that onto a smaller level and you go to the friendship, which is actually going to be more deep or intimate, you could say, right? That's going to be on the same idea, this reciprocity, this common good you're pursuing, and this interpersonal communication, right? You have a feeling of oneness there, right? And these phenomenologists that I've mentioned would back this up, right? Husserl, if you want to, there's essays on his emotive consciousness and his ethics, and then later in his life he develops a philosophy for the we. So I would check that out. His ideas in his I believe it's the third section. You're going to see this idea come up, and the idea of empathy in his Cartesian meditations. Stein, again, problem of empathy for her. Wojtyła, reciprocity, love and responsibility. Dietrich von Hildebrand, almost every single book you're going to see something of this sort. Right, all phenomenologists. I'd even throw Maurice Merleau-Ponty in there. In his Phenomenology of Perception, he's going to touch upon an idea of community. So this idea of oneness, and then you add what I just said and put that in the context of marriage, which we've already discussed as a different quality of love, a highest expression of love, of human love. I fail to see how our phenomenologists are in agreement of an absence of a feeling of oneness, right? And the professor in question was really focusing on the idea of loving the relationship between love versus loving the person, right? And there's a difference there, which there is for sure, but there's a necessity for both of them. And phenomenology does make that distinction, but phenomenology also focuses on loving the other, not from the Sartre Beauvoirian view, who are phenomenologists, and I give it that. But if you look at other phenomenologists, such as the ones I've mentioned, there's this idea of interpersonal communication and a feeling of oneness, right? Where now we move into the realm of, you could say theology, but the idea of the two becoming one, right? This is in the beginning of Genesis, and it's this interpersonal communication, and it's deeper than that, right? It's reality. I'm not trying to limit, right, the scriptures to that, but philosophically, you can show the idea of oneness, and I just fail to see how phenomenology doesn't support that. Actually, I think phenomenology does a great job of showing the idea of oneness and the interpersonal communication between one another. So this is a response to that video. If I have misunderstood, if people know what I'm referring to, and if I misunderstood it, please let me know, and I will be happy to be corrected. If you disagree with me, please let me know. Hopefully we can talk about it in a genuine, charitable manner. Not in an argumentative, but just in a conversation, right? Let me know. But I hope this helps, because I know for sure that there was an argument for non-monogamous love and marriage, and I just don't agree with that, and I think that's very dangerous to start thinking that way. So I hope this video helped clear some things, and if you're confused, I think the bottom line was, I think the video confused. It was very confusing, and left phenomenology as ambiguous. And so I just want to make this video and to clarify where phenomenology stands, and if you can find that idea of oneness in it, and I think you can. So I hope this video helps, and then thank you, and please like, subscribe, share, and comment, please, if you have any questions, and hope to see you next time. God bless.